Okay. Okay, well tonight what I want us to do is we're going to talk a little bit about learning and how that relates to PLCs, and then we're going to spend some more time discussing how do you handle people who are difficult or a challenge in a PLC. I'm sure none of you have ever had that as an issue or a concern, but just in case you might face that in the future, let's go ahead and do some talking about it this evening. So let's start first by talking about what does learning mean? And how do we go about ensuring that students are able to learn effectively and efficiently? So one of the main goals, oh, awesome, that's great, Kimberly. Sorry, I'm reading over on the side on the chat. One of the most important things that you have to do when you are working in your PLC is to make sure that you are focusing on learning. So the critical elements of a PLC usually is going to start with data. You know, and if you're in my EDL 707 class, there's a lot of different ways that you can look at and use data. But data is an essential piece to making sure that you know exactly what it is your students need. So hang on, I'm going to show you a real quick graphic that I found tonight. So back when I was still in the assistant superintendency, we actually developed this lovely little chart here, and I'm sorry you probably can't see the whole thing, but I'll take a picture of it and post it in Moodle for you. But we were able to, in Dallas, for all of our teachers, we had collaborative planning periods built into the schedule. So they got not only their regular 45-minute planning time, but they got an additional time that was done simply for PLCs and collaborative planning. Well, we noticed pretty quickly that that time was not being used very effectively or very efficiently. Teachers were spending a lot of time doing things that really had nothing to do with instruction or assessment or student achievement. So we came up with this handy-dandy little chart that we asked everybody to put in the room, and the more that I thought about it and looked at it, I thought, God, this is really actually a pretty good synopsis of what a PLC should be. So we were called the West Secondary Learning Community at the time. So our plan of action or theory of action for the way that we wanted teachers to teach focused on the work of Lynn Resnick. She's actually a professor at the University of Pittsburgh, and she's done a lot of work talking about how to most effectively teach students. So the principles of learning that we expected that the teachers had to make sure when they planned their lessons, they were focusing on these areas. And it's probably stuff that you guys have seen, maybe just called different names, but it starts with academic rigor. So, you know, you have to make sure that there's rigor in the curriculum. Otherwise, we know our students aren't going to be successful. What we called accountable talk, and that wasn't accountable talk for the teacher. That was actually student to student, so that they were talking about the lesson and the learning and asking high-level questions of each other, etc. There also had to be clear expectations. You know, I will tell you, I've probably observed 10,000 teachers in my career. And there are many times that I've gone into a classroom as an adult with 2 degrees, and I could not for the life of me figure out what the teacher wanted those students to do. So it is very important that we help teachers understand clear expectations. The last one was socializing intelligence. And what we meant by that was that we had to also teach our students, because we were, you know, a very impoverished district, a lot of second language learners, we had to teach our students how to study and how to learn. So we went beyond just the academic content, but in some ways this was social content as well as developing academic vocabulary and other pieces. The other thing that we asked our teachers to do was common assessments. So we've talked a little bit about that before and how you need to plan for that. Then we had our pyramid of interventions, and I think I mentioned this to you guys last time, where, you know, we're focusing not only on RTI and those elements, but also the enrichment piece. Then moving on up, obviously analyzing data, and we'll talk about sort of the cycle that this needs to work in. Utilization of the CPGs, all the CPGs was what we called our curriculum planning guides. Also, we did learning walks where teams would go out and observe teachers across our campus and it was by no means evaluative. It was simply to get a feel for what was going on. We also expected them to talk about academic reflection and celebration. So as you're thinking about data, this is a key element. Were we focusing on our academic targets? Were we making sure from our learning walks that we had the right kind of professional development for the teachers? We also did common lesson planning. And then finally, we did a lot of, you can't kind of see here at the bottom, but analyzing student work. And so the nice thing about it was, too, we also included verbiage so they knew exactly what it was for each one of these. So, for example, I'm not going to read them all, but student work. We will regularly examine students' work to identify discrepancies and expectations, to look for evidence of rigor and evidence of the use of the curriculum planning guide. We will take corrective action based on our findings. We'll examine our efforts, modify, and adjust to ensure quality. So with this, it became very clear what they were supposed to be doing in a PLC. So as you're thinking about a professional learning community and how you can best start it, put it together, what do you do? This kind of a tool can be really, really helpful to keep everybody on target and on track. So let's assume that you're starting your PLC for the very first time. After you've done sort of the norm setting and the team building stuff and all of that, and there's some rules and expectations in place, that's probably the best thing to do in your first meeting. But moving to your second meeting, you definitely would want to start with analyzing your data so you know where the gaps are as well as where the students were doing well. You also want to spend some time talking about your particular school's teaching and learning expectations. So, maybe it's collaborative learning. Maybe you guys are using thinking maps. You may have lots of different best practices that they expect to see, but these two absolutely should be happening in the first couple of meetings. And it may take you more than one meeting to get through them. Once you kind of know where you are and what needs to be the focus and the center of all of this, and you know how you're going to go about planning and delivering instruction based on your theory of action or your learning plan for the school, then you're going to begin to sort of move through all of these different elements according to what you've decided here are the most critical things that you want to work on. So for example, let's say that we know from our data that we really need to work on some areas in literacy. Our students are having a very difficult time inferencing. So as we think about how are we going to teach inferencing, we're going to make sure that we understand how those elements need to be taught in accordance with our district or our school's plans. Then from there, you're going to probably do and go into some common lesson planning. And you're also going to be utilizing your curriculum at that point. After you do those pieces, and you're also going to make sure too you're hitting your academic targets. After you do those pieces, yeah, somebody probably needs to mute their mic here. Thank you. So anyway, once you look at and analyze your data and you've done your common lesson plannings and you're ensuring that you're using your curriculum guide and you're going to be able to hit these academic targets, and that may take you 2 to 3 meeting times to actually get all of that done. Then you're going to go in and do some learning walks, which is going to then drive your professional development. And maybe as those units or lessons are being taught, you're going to want to spend some time as well analyzing student work so that you know whether or not the instruction is meeting the expectations. As you're a part of all that process, towards the end of your cycle of PLCs, you're going to want to also look at some common assessment elements as well as your interventions. Okay? So does that kind of make sense? Like I said, I wish I could, I only have one monitor working tonight, or I would be able to actually show you this guy on a computer, but because, like I said, of the move, it's a mess. But yeah, I will definitely post a picture of the front as well as the back of this handy dandy little guide. And you can see it's I guess I don't know, maybe a little bigger than legal size and laminated. But I also thought too, this was a pretty important element that we put at the bottom. Sorry, it's kind of floppy here. you know, we wanted to affirm how important teachers were. So we said our teachers make the difference. We know that teachers who collaborate have more success with students than those who do not. Our teachers are taking full advantage of our collaborative planning time. So again, we're setting expectations and able to use a pretty handy, nice little guide that sets the cycle. Okay? Does that make sense? Okay. I'm looking over here. CPG was actually a Dallas thing. It's what we called our curriculum guide. It's just curriculum planning guide. That's all it is. So somebody else too was asking about book studies. Yeah, that can be a great outgrowth of the learning walk process. So if you're looking and you see that, gosh, everybody's really struggling with teaching, I don't know, vocabulary is always one. You know, then a great part of that is professional development could be a book study. And you might want to look at that as well. Okay. So yeah, we did. We created, we were the, okay, in Dallas, it's a very large school district, 20,000 employees, 160,000 plus students. And we were divided into what they called learning communities, and it was geographical. So we were on the west side of the Dallas area. And so we were called West, and it was all secondary schools at that time. We actually changed it later, and it was pre-K-12. But West Secondary, we're the ones that created this, yes. It was our work. Okay. All right, so beginning to understand how this cycle, a PLC cycle might work. And I do want to make sure you understand too, you guys, there's no place, what am I trying to say? It's not like it's step 1, step 2, step 3, which drives some of us who are very concrete sequential brains a little bit crazy. It is purposely not written as a flow chart or as steps, because you can jump in at any point and do any one of these, or 2 or 3 or 4 in a single PLC lesson. What you have to determine with your team is, where do we need to start? Okay? You may have already done a lot of data analysis as a school. As I've been reading, you got your assignments and stuff. A lot of you say, you know, that you spend 1 or 2 days, you know, as school is starting analyzing data. Well, you've probably done this element. So you're not, you know, as you're getting into your smaller groups or your PLCs, you can absolutely focus on any one of these. The point of this, though, is that's really critical is, if you're truly going to have a professional learning community that is effective and is efficient and makes a difference in terms of your student achievement, this is the kind of stuff you got to do. It's not okay to talk about the upcoming Halloween party or the field trip or the parent that's getting on your last nerve, that kind of thing. That is not what a professional learning community is supposed to be doing. So this is, like I said, we actually laminated these and we posted them in every single team room at every campus, so that it was that very visual sort of reminder, this is the work that we're supposed to be doing. Okay? Questions, comments, thoughts, ideas? Is anybody else doing something like this? No? Okay. Okay, let's talk for a second about learning walks, because I know that's something that a lot of people, yeah, some people say theirs is in the form of a cycle, and that's okay. It's not a bad thing to, you know, use a cycle, but we wanted to give our teachers a lot more flexibility. Because sometimes, you know, what we saw happening was some principals were very didactic in how they would present this information, and it was like, you have to do step 1, then you have to do step 2, and you have to do step 3. When in reality, what can happen is you may need to actually skip around. And what I mean by that is, let's say that you did a learning walk and you were noticing that, gosh, some of the work students were being asked to do was not at the level of academic rigor that we would expect. How do you confirm that? Well, I'd skip down here and I'd actually ask to look at some student work samples and analyze them so that you really get a good sense of it, okay? And remember, it's not about individual teachers, it's about the overall system that's happening in a school. Okay, so that's, like I said, why we chose not to make it a step 1, step 2, step 3, because there are times you're really going to, you know, kind of just jump all over the place, and that's okay. Okay, so let's talk for a second about, so let me kind of backtrack here. So obviously in a PLC, there's lots of different things that you can be doing. And people have asked me, in some of the questions, and as I was reading some of the midterm assignments that have already been turned in, how do you get started? What is it that you need to be doing to sort of get this moving and happening? Well, PLCs can be formed both formally as well as informally. So you may be in a school where there's already a structure in place, and that, PLCs meet every Wednesday, or you guys have a collaborative planning time like we did in Dallas, where they met every other day, quite honestly, which was kind of nice. It's just going to depend. But if there's a formal structure in place, then it's already formed in essence. So it might be by content, it might be by grade level, it might be horizontal, it might be vertical. What do you do when you're in that PLC? Let's assume you're starting from scratch. That's the first time a PLC has ever met. It's the first time this grouping has happened. I would spend some intentional time in team building, getting to know each other, and building trust. A lot of people skip that step. If you skip that step, we're going to talk here in a minute about how conflict resolution and what do you do with difficult people in a PLC. You can avoid a whole lot of those problems if you will take the time to get to know each other, to really appreciate and value each other, and to begin to form that relational trust that has to be there. Now, if you are not in a system where there's a formal process for PLCs and you want to just do this on your own, I think it's kind of a very great opportunity for you to do whatever you want to do. So for example, you may be you're in a small school and you're the sole science teacher. So you might want to reach out to science teachers in other schools or neighboring districts or parishes and ask them to come and be a part of a PLC with you. I know I've seen that happen very frequently, and it's really very positive. The other part of it you may want to do too is to do something that is more vertical. So let's say you're the 8th grade teacher in a middle school. I would absolutely be reaching out to those 9th grade teachers at the high school and say, hey, we need to start talking and getting together and really planning and thinking about what does that transition need to look like for our students, what are the expectations going in. But conversely, letting those 9th grade teachers know what you've been teaching as an 8th grade teacher, so when the kids get there and say, I've never seen this in my whole life, the teacher can say, not true. We absolutely know that you can do this. Just trying to kind of watch this, okay? After that you do those team building activities and get everybody sort of together, the next thing that I would do would be to set some norms and establish ground rules. Now, the most effective way to set norms is to do it collaboratively, and if you don't know how to do that, just shoot me an email and I'll be glad to send you some norm setting or norm building activities that are really easy. But also, like I said, not just the norms, but also some ground rules. That, for example, things like, you're going to have to do some pre-work before we come to our PLC. So make sure that this is the expectation that you do these things. And also assign roles within the PLC. Nobody gets to be passive in an effective PLC. So you obviously might have a leader, you might have a timekeeper, a facilitator. We always included the role of someone who was devil's advocate. So when everybody was, thought we had all reached the same conclusion, and people who are kind of contrary, they love to be the devil's advocate. They just think it's a whole lot of fun. And they would start asking just really difficult questions and challenging our thinking. And we thought that really was helpful. Another little trick that we used was we would put 2 empty chairs there at the table with us or at the front of the room, depending on our arrangement. One of those was named Amber, and the other chair, there was an imaginary person there named Bob. Well, Amber represented our student. So as we would begin to make decisions and collaborate and reach that sort of consensus place, before we would finalize our decisions or our plans, we would look at, symbolically, Amber, our student, and we would ask ourselves, is this best for Amber? Is this going to work for her? Then if we got that all together and decided that worked, then we would look at our imaginary person over here, Bob. Well, Bob actually was named after a teacher at the school, but we didn't tell him that. He was the most difficult, challenging teacher that any of us had ever dealt with. He would not even talk to me as his principal without his attorney present. He challenged everybody. Now, he was a brilliant man, you know, and actually a really good teacher. But he just loved it. If everybody said the sky is blue, he was going to absolutely make a case that it was green. So we knew that if we were making decisions that we could get Bob to accept and for him to follow, then we were good to go. So that was also a really helpful piece for us as we talked about within our teams and our PLCs as well. So then after you have done some team building, you've got those norms, those expectations, you have a process for how you're going to do the work. It's literally jump right in. And where you start, yeah, somebody's got their mic on again. Where you actually start with all of this is going to have to, it's going to depend on where you are as a school, where you are as a team, and what the particular need is. I'm looking at how often should teams meet. Guys, that's really kind of up to you and how much time you have and are willing to commit. You know, I created, because I love board processes and cycles and stuff. So as a principal, we had PLCs every week, but we varied them. So twice a month, it was our grade level or content. So like twice a month, the math teachers did their PLC, English teachers, etc.
No way.
Then one time a month, or we would do them across by grade level. So all the 9th grade teachers would be together. So you might have, yeah, guys, I don't know who's got their mic on. Let me see if I can find you. Because I'll mute you.
Okay,
hang on, guys.
On the rocks. And sugar rim? Yeah, that's fine. And do you have your ID?
Sorry, guys.
Yeah. Y'all might be secret shoppers. ABC board, alcohol board. I'm 18. I'm just.
Okay, is that a little better? Okay. Sorry, it just took me a minute to find who it was. So anyway, then once a week we would meet horizontally. So you would have, like I said, by maybe grade level or whatever. And then one time a month we would meet with just the department chairs or just the team leaders or whatever. So it was the leadership team. I've known schools where they met and had PLCs 3 to 4 times a week. Some of them only have them once a month. I don't think there's actually an ideal or set time that you need to do these, but I think if you only do them once a month, that's probably too infrequent. You know, I would say it would have to be probably at least twice, if not 3 times a month, to be really, really effective. Okay. Sorry, I'm kind of reading over here on this side. Okay, so what questions, comments, or thoughts do you guys have about sort of how this all happens? Any questions? Yeah, Guy, go ahead.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I'm just trying to figure out how to speak here. So would one PLC per week work, or is that not enough, do you think?
You know, honestly, with the amount of work and stuff that teachers have, I think once a week is absolutely fine. If it's intentional and productive time. You know, like I said, a well-planned PLC and one that's very executed very well, once a week is fine. But, you know, that you just kind of have to really get the rhythm going. Okay. Okay, if you have somebody asked, Kimberly asked about a daily PLC. Oh, wow, that's an incredible opportunity. I would be doing a ton of data analysis, unit planning, lesson planning. We'd be analyzing and looking at student work, all kinds of stuff like that. So that's just a great opportunity. Okay. I will. Yeah, I think everybody has a Bob on their campus. And you know what's really funny is after I left the principalship and all that, he and I actually became really good friends. But we certainly did not like each other very much when we were both working together. That was for sure. So let's talk about the learning walk. One of the ways, too, that you can keep PLCs from getting really stale and just sort of feeling sort of redundant and repetitive is to do what we call learning walks. And I think it may be coming up. If not, I'll try to remember to do this, was to post some of our observation forums. Some people call them walkthroughs. Some people call them peer observations. There's a million different names. We purposely chose the name Learning Walk because we tried to minimize that connotation that we were coming in and bringing other teachers in to evaluate their peers. We were hopeful that this would allow us to sort of mitigate that fear and resentment and all of that. And we had 3 very simple things that we did when we went into a classroom as part of a learning walk. First thing we did was we just charted what was happening in the classroom. And literally, if you've ever learned how to or done any kind of evaluative training, where they talk about scripting. So, literally it's like teacher asked, Johnny, what's the answer to number 5? Johnny responded incorrectly. Susie was off task. I mean, literally you just kind of scripted what was going on. And we never stayed in a classroom more than 5 minutes. That may seem like a very short amount of time, but I will tell you, you can learn everything you need to know about teaching within a classroom for this purpose within 5 minutes or less. Sometimes we only stayed in there 3 minutes. Then we would come out as a group outside into the hallway, and we all had our little observation forms on the clipboard, and everybody had their script. And then the next 2 elements was one thing that we called a wondering. Okay, so for example, I wonder how the teacher is going to handle Susie, who clearly did not understand the objective for the day. Okay, no judgment, just simply a question, and we always phrased it as I'm wondering if, I'm wondering how, I'm wondering why, whatever. Then the last thing that we would do is one thing that we saw in that classroom that we thought should be replicated either in the teacher, my own classroom, or maybe as a school-wide initiative. Then, after we were done, whoever was leading that walk, and we all took turns. It wasn't always the campus leadership. Now, I always made a campus leader go with the teachers, just, again, for organizational kind of purposes. But usually, because like I said, we had our math teachers off together, our English teachers off together, our social studies teachers off together so they could do true collaborative planning. So when that team would go in, whoever was leading that walk would collect everybody's observations. And we did not put, Tracy said this or David said that. It was literally, here is all of those. And we typed it up and just did a running script of what everybody observed. Then the next section was we listed everybody's wonderings. And then we listed everybody's, everybody's idea that they were going to take away. And we published that to the whole faculty. Okay, so everybody got a sense of what was going on in the classroom. And the way we worked it was that after we would do 1 week of learning walks, we would look at all of this collective anecdotal data that we had, and we would try to find what were the high leverage things happening in a classroom that we needed to work on. So for example, as a principal, we would notice that, gosh, nobody really knows how to teach inferencing appropriately, or we're struggling with students being able to read efficiently and effectively in content areas such as science or social studies. And then that's how we decided what our professional development should be. We also did not do the big generic, everybody does this, because, obviously reading comprehension should be taught pretty well by the reading teachers. But when we had this issue with reading comprehension not working in our other content classes, well, guess who did the professional development for everybody else? Our reading teachers, okay? So see how this all kind of begins to come together in terms of a cycle and a process. Okay. The other thing that went along with those learning walks was we would ask, after we did learning walks, we would ask teachers to bring 3 work samples to their PLCs. Okay. One was from what they thought was the best student result, so this is like your 100 or your A student. Then to bring a piece of work that they considered to be average, and then to bring a piece of work that they thought was below average. And we had a process that we did that it was actually a protocol that we used to analyze student work, and we would look at it from the perspective of, is it rigorous? Is it meeting the standard? And then finally, is this backing up the fact that we need professional development in these areas? Okay. So that was all a part of that. And like I said, it's pretty simple. It wasn't that difficult to do, but I will tell you, it was incredibly, incredibly powerful. Because teachers not only got to go in each other's classrooms and see, but it was really interesting. Some teachers that, maybe people perceived as not being very good teachers, they were like, wow, they're really awesome in the classroom. And it also made everybody step their game up, because guess what? If you've got other people coming in, even though it's not evaluative, it really did help them. Okay. How many teachers in the learning walk? We tried to keep our groups, and sometimes if it was a really big department, we go in 2 groups. We try to keep it between 3 and 5 people, just because it's kind of disruptive if you walk in there with 10 people, and looking around. But the more you do it, everybody just kind of gets comfortable with it as well. Yeah, I do have the document. I'll post that for everybody. Oh, I like that catwalk. That's cute. Okay. Okay, so with that being said, let's kind of move on tonight so we don't run out of time. And let's talk about what happens. You got this PLC, so you've got the process, you've done your team building, everything's working, but then you have the Bob in the classroom or in the PLC who just wants to either not participate, or they will try to bully and harass other people, or they will make very negative comments, etc. Now, I will tell you that if you are a leader in a PLC, you have to know how to effectively manage conflict. And even if you're not the leader in a PLC, do not let people who are being disruptive, abusive, negative, whatever, get by with it. There's a great article that I wish I could find again called The Culture of Nice. Teachers tend to be too nice when it comes to their peers. Behavior that you would not accept from a spouse or a sibling or a friend, you are more than willing to accept from a colleague. Now, there's a way to tell people in a nice, polite way that they're not behaving appropriately. But in schools, we have what I said, like I said, it's called the culture of nice. And you have to make sure that you actually address it. But let's remember too, managing conflict is not easy. And for some people, it's much more difficult than others. But it's also normal. So if you're starting something new, and if you understand or know anything about the change process, which I think Dr. Perry talks about in his class, there is going to be a time where there is a lot of fighting. It's called storming. It's part of that culture cycle. So that is okay. Let there be some storming. Just don't let it get personal in terms of how it's being handled. But you also need individuals in your PLCs who are going to ask the hard questions, who are not going to just be yes to everything. Okay, so what is conflict? Conflict can occur in any situation when our personal desires or thoughts differ from somebody else's. Now, a lot of times people are silent about their differences or their conflict. Other times they're very, very vocal. But when you have conflict, there's usually a much more complex set of issues going on that have to be addressed. Oftentimes when there's conflict, it's not about what people say it is about. It's actually something more deeply rooted within either their own personal lives or the way they think they're viewed as teachers or their professionalism. So let me give you an example. When I first got to MacArthur High School, where I was the principal, big, huge high school, lots of people have been there since, the mortar was drying on the bricks since 1968, and I came in 2000. I was only the third principal of the school, and I was the first female principal of the school. So, yeah, change was pretty hard for these people. And there was this one particular teacher who what had been there honestly since 1968, and she was very much what I would call an influencer. She always seemed to know everything that was going on, and she had no problem spreading gossip or rumors or innuendo or anything like that. And because she was one of the sages of the school who had helped to open this high school, everybody listened to her. And so I remember, it was probably the first couple weeks I was there, and I'm talking to my administrative team, and we're sort of going through the staff, and I'm, tell me a little bit about each person, what are their strengths, what are areas maybe they need improvement, that kind of stuff. And we got to Patsy. And, everybody, first of all, I knew something was up, and everybody rolled their eyes before anybody began talking. And they began to describe her. And I just kind of, at this point, I'm just taking notes. I'm just learning, not really forming any opinions. So after I had done this with my leadership team, I invited, this was during the summer, I invited all the teachers to come and have just to sit down with me, either individually or in small groups or however they wanted. And, very simple, tell me what's working at this school, tell me what's not working, what's the one thing that if we could change this, it would be the best thing ever. Well, she decided to come by herself. And, we got through the what's working at this school list pretty quickly because she didn't think anything was working. And we had I honestly think I scripted 5 pages of what was wrong. And I asked her, I said, okay, so, obviously a lot of things need work here. What's the one thing? And I don't even remember what she said. And I said, great, I'm glad to hear that. I said, I'm going to put you on my teacher leadership team. And she was kind of taken aback because she was so difficult at times and such a gossip person and all that, that previously they never included her in any kind of leadership roles. So a few days later, I'm telling my leadership or administrative team, here's the names of the people. And, some of them, they're like, oh, yeah, that's great, that's great. And then we got to Patsy, and they're like, have you lost your mind? And I said, maybe I have, and this may blow up on our faces, but I said, I'm going to give it a try. Well, lo and behold, Patsy became the very best advocate we had in the school, because nobody had ever recognized her innate skills and her leadership ability. And so as we were trying some pretty new and very creative sort of innovative solutions that were a hard sell, Patsy sold stuff for me to the rest of the faculty that I never could have. And again, it was just that untapped leadership that she had that had turned negative because nobody had ever given her a real chance. In fact, she did such a great job when we got our National Brewer in Schools Award. I took her with us to actually get the award in Washington, D.C. because she had made such a huge difference. So don't be afraid of conflict. Sometimes you have to hit it head on. Sometimes you have to minimize it. But at the end of the day, I always give them work. People who disagree with you, if you keep them really busy, they don't have time to disagree. And I would do this all the time too with parents. In fact, I had a parent who came in and told me, she knew all this, and I know this person and that person, and I don't know why you're not reaching out to the community more, and blah, 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 blah. And it just went on and on. And my associate principal was in there with me, and I looked at her and I said, great. I said, I'm going to put you down to be in charge of our PTA community relations. And I said, and so since you have all these great contacts in the media and all that, and you can get the word out, let me know when you can do this. This is a lady who had been in my office at least every other day for the 3 months preceding that. Once I gave her an actual job, I never heard from her again. So like I said, don't be afraid of conflict. Use it to your advantage, okay? And the book has some great ideas about conflict and how to address it. So let's talk a little bit more about how we can actually resolve these conflicts and not ignore them. So, according to the researchers Kenneth Thomas and Ralph Kilman, they say there are 5 ways that we can deal with conflict, and that people tend to have their own preferred conflict resolution style, okay? So, I'm sure you're sitting here thinking, okay, what does she mean by that? Well, a lot of people will avoid conflict. Some people will face it head on, but you have to understand what your natural reaction is to conflict before you can resolve it. So, what are the 5 conflict resolution styles? Some people like to compete because the goal is to win. My last supervisor that I had, the chief in Dallas, anytime there was conflict, it was competition for her. She was going to win no matter what. So I had to understand that along with my colleagues so that we could better work with her. Collaboration or collaborating. The goal is to find a win-win solution. Hopefully you have leadership or you're working with teachers where the goal is to do a win-win, but that's not always going to be the case. Compromising. So we all know what it means to compromise. You're going to find the middle ground. Avoiding. The goal is to delay. Okay, and I'm going to give you a little trick for those of you that want to go into school leadership. Whenever a parent would come in and have a complaint, all I would do is listen. And then I would tell them that I will get back with them within 3 days with my response. And my response was generally going to be in writing. Because you know what? A lot of times in that 3-day period, whatever the issue was, naturally resolved itself. We also use that technique all the time with discipline. So a kid gets in a fight, does this, does that. We would send them home for 24 hours while we investigated. And then we would, again, communicate that disciplinary decision in writing because you need that cool down time. And then the last one is accommodating. And the goal is to yield. Sometimes, you know, you may have heard the saying, you know, what hill are you willing to die on? There are just times that it's just not worth the fight. You were going to lose way more by winning the fight than if you just let things lie. So how do you become effective at managing conflict? You have to understand and think about and spend time figuring out what the other person's conflict style is and what their motivation is. So if there's someone who must always win an argument, I know you've never known anybody like that, you have to respond differently to someone who's in that competitor mode than someone who is just going to be willing to avoid and move on. So first thing you do, you assess the situation and you ask yourself what need or desire is not being met with this person you're having a conflict. So for me, with Patsy, thankfully I got it right. She was not being appreciated for her skills and her leadership. Okay? You also have to choose how you want to respond. Okay? So one of the most difficult things when you're in a leadership type role or a teaching role is to make sure that you don't overreact or underreact. Okay? Then you have to take action and you actually have to find a resolution. So when do you use which kind of conflict resolution? Okay, so competing is used if you need to take quick action, make an unpopular decision, or stand up for vital issues. Okay, what do we mean by that? You have a person in your building who has a gun. Obviously, you know, people may want to approach that differently, but you better just stand up and take care of business. There is no way that you're going to do anything but win the argument and move forward. When you are going to collaborate is when you want to integrate a solution to learn or to merge perspectives. Okay, so particularly in a PLC, you're going to do a lot of collaborative conflict resolution. That means everybody gets a voice, everybody is heard, and you need to use unique and different techniques to come to consensus. So how many of you guys have ever heard of the nominal group technique? Anybody? Okay, it's my favorite technique. I use it all the time when I'm working with groups. And I may have to put this off till next time, but for the sake of time, it's pretty simple. You give everybody a stack of sticky notes. And let's say you're trying to solve a problem and you've listed, let's go back to Patsy. So, you know, everything that's wrong with our school, okay? You post them all up on chart paper and everybody has sticky notes and you have them number them 1 to whatever. So if there's 20 things on there, they get 1 to 20. They get 20 individual sticky notes and they would write a 1 on a sticky note, a 2 on a sticky note, a 3 on a sticky note, on down the line. Then they have to go and post what's their most important or the most critical thing that needs to be worked on. That's number 1. What's the least important thing we need to work on? That's number 20. And everybody in the group has to put a sticky note by whatever the statement or the solution or the problem or whatever it is you're working on. Then you tally and total them. The thing that the particular problem, let's say in this case, which let's say for us it was tardies. Tardies had the lowest number. That was the thing that everybody thought was the highest priority. Guess what? That's what we're going to work on. Everybody got to have input. It wasn't a vote. Nobody knows how anybody else scored anything, but that is how you build consensus. Okay? Does that make sense? Real simple. And I'll try to find the actual directions and send them to y'all. Compromising is what you do when you need to resolve issues that are only moderately important and there's equal power amongst your constituents. It is also temporary oftentimes. Okay? So for example, we are moving offices. Everybody, it was sort of fruit basket turnover at LSUS. Our dean decided that she needed to regroup everybody. And she's a very strong-willed person and has very clear ideas of how she wants things. But, you know, there were some people who really had some problems with that. So she made some compromises. So for example, you know, they got to take their favorite piece of furniture to their new office space, so she compromised. And like I said, that's a way to do that. Avoiding mode is something that you do when you need to leave an unimportant issue alone. Okay? Teachers and leaders tend to be problem solvers. You don't always have to solve the problem, guys. Teachers will come in and they will oftentimes, or parents or students, dump their problems on you to solve, but it's not your problem to solve. Give the problem right back to them. Okay? And then the last one is accommodating mode, and that's when you just need to keep the peace. Like I said, and for me, that was always, you know, am I willing to die on this hill? You know, if it's not that important, then, you know, let the other person get what they want. It's just not worth the fight or the time or the energy. Okay? All right. Let me see what else I want to tell y'all tonight. And also, too, don't forget when you're thinking about conflict resolution, too, perception is reality. You know, unfortunately, there are times that I've looked at situations and I'm like, why do they even think that? That's not the way it is. But I had to remind myself it was their perception. So don't forget that really important point. Yeah, Kale, I like that. If you come to me with a problem, come with a solution. Yeah, exactly. Okay, good. All right, so in our last couple minutes here, 15 minutes or so, what questions, comments, concerns do you guys have? There's some really, really good stuff going on in the chat if you're not reading it. Really good ideas. Okay, I seem to be getting a lot of questions too, just before I forget, about when is the group assignment due and when is the midterm due. Okay. Maybe I didn't say this because we've missed our first meeting since I was sick, so I'm a little bit behind. I am the most flexible instructor you will ever have, probably at LSUS. I do not get too shook up about due dates or anything like that. Ideally, I would love it if you guys could have the group project in by the 5th of August and the midterm by the 12th. But if you turn it in on the 12th, I'm not going to penalize you, you know, whatever. The only thing I want to warn you about, though, is if you wait till the last minute, all the stuff that's due will tend to snowball on you. But I understand, you know, school's getting ready to start again. People are busy. You have actual lives. So, you know, really, I'm very flexible. I'm very easygoing. I've lived in your shoes. I've worked in the real world, you know, not just the ivory tower of a university. So I get it. I know what your lives are like. And that's absolutely fine. Just, you know, don't worry about it. And also, too, don't overthink these assignments. You know, it's not like I'm asking you to build rockets or anything. So much of, you know, creating learning communities and this kind of stuff is really intuitive. There's not a right or a wrong answer. It's just finding what works best based on your individual situations. Every school's different. Every classroom's different. Every group of human beings is going to be different. So I just hope to give you sort of some foundational pieces that will help you. And the more you grow in your leadership, the better it'll become. For the group project, yeah, one person can turn it in. You don't all have to do that. And I don't know, Moodle hates me. So if you have a hard time submitting, just email it to me. Okay. Yeah, and if for some reason I missed you guys that you wanted to do the group project on your own, just email me, email all of your group members that you're opting to do it individually and copy me. That's probably the quickest way now to let people know. But I really do hope you guys will work together because you will become a very close group and cohort over time, trust me. And when it's time to study for that SLLA, it'll be nice to know some of your teammates if you're in the MEDL program. Yeah, and like I said, group project, the 5th, the 12th, I don't care. Midterm, same thing. Just get it to me whenever you can. No worries. Okay? Anything else? You guys are just like really quiet tonight.
I just want to piggyback on what you just said. I took the SLLA last week, maybe 2 weeks.
Oh, wow.
And I studied with 2 people that I had met through group projects, so it's definitely nice to have.
Yeah, thanks, Amy. I appreciate you saying that. And you know, after all, this is a class on professional learning communities. So, you know, it's sort of important that you form your own professional learning community as part of the group project. And I know people say it's really hard to do because it's all virtual as opposed to face-to-face. But I'm going to give you, you know, some earth-shattering news. I predict within the next, I used to say 30 years, then I dropped it to 20, I'm almost to 10. Brick and mortar schools, guys, are becoming less and less financially solvent and able to do and all that kind of stuff. I mean, the online learning community is growing exponentially in pre-K through 12. So this is a great sort of trial and error time to figure out how to do it virtually with people from all over the country. I used to, just for fun, I tutored a student who was completely 100% in an online school. And I just would tutor her in math because that was her difficulty. But, I mean, they did virtual field trips together and all kinds of cool stuff. So don't let it be too much. And, yeah, doing the group project through Google Docs, yeah, thanks, Kimberly. That's a great idea. Okay. All right, anything else, guys? All righty, well, I'm going to turn off the recording and go ahead and wish you well. You get 7 minutes back of your life tonight. Thank y'all. Have a great night.